Hello, my beautiful motorheads. Welcome to Feroz, where we inspire you to live fiercely. I'm your host, Anik Magak. Today's guest has been noted as one of the 100 top females in power sports by Dealer News. In addition, Sarah Schilke is also the co-owner of Women Riders Now. Since 1999, this has been one of the top resources for women and those who ride with us. Sarah has worked her whole career in the motorcycle industry, and not only has she worked in the US, but she's also worked internationally. I think you will enjoy her perspective and insight. So, have you worked your whole career in the moto industry?
Pretty much, yes. My first job, I started out working as a motorcycle safety instructor and then on staff for Team Oregon, and it just kind of took off from there.
Is that like a rider's education program like that each state has?
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
Okay, okay.
Mhm.
And you got started with that in college, right?
Yes, I did. So
Yeah. So, what drew you to that?
I don't know. I just had this wild hair one night and I thought, for some reason, I thought, oh, it'd be cool to ride a motorcycle. And I was out with some friends and I told them, like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if I had a motorcycle? And everyone had a good laugh. But a couple days later, one of the guys whose dad rides, he brought me an ad for a used bike from the newspaper. And he was like, if you're serious about what you said the other night, this would be a great bike for you. And it was a little 250 Rebel. I had no idea there were different brands or styles of bikes or any of that. But one night, again, with the wild hair, I called on it and it was a woman selling it. So I actually felt pretty comfortable asking her all my stupid questions. And I ended up buying it. And thankfully, she pointed me in the direction of the training program. So I was off to a pretty good start.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's actually very serendipitous.
Yeah, exactly.
So, where did it progress from there? Because obviously you finished college, and then what happened?
So from there, I actually got recruited away by this woman who was trying to start to help the industry understand the women's motorcycle market and help them reach it. And this was way back in the mid 90s. And so she brought me on to help do some writing and some events with her and her Women's Motorcycle Market Journal. So I got involved with that. We created a program to bring women into dealerships and kind of give them a motorcycle 101. And we had this industry publication. And it didn't last very long. And I think the industry wasn't ready for it at the time. But since
Mhm.
then, we've seen a lot of demand for information about women riders and how do I reach that market and how do I set up my dealership for success with the women's market. So I feel like it's kind of been there for a long time, and it was nice to get that foundation because I've definitely used some of the insights that I had there at the beginning of my career throughout.
Oh, that's great. I was just recently looking because I've been curious lately, like what the percentage of women riders have been. And some of the stats that I found, and maybe you can correct me or maybe you have some newer stats, but they were saying that in the 90s, especially by 2000, it was about 10% of the market. And then I would say, like, probably in 2017, it was noted that we were 19% of the market.
Mhm.
And there's some speculation that from what I read or was able to find that they say maybe now it's at 22%, but I think because the last time they took the analysis, it's still considered 19%. I don't know if you have any newer information on that.
Yeah, so that was a study that the Motorcycle Industry Council did back in
Okay.
17, I think it was. And the Motorcycle Industry Council hasn't updated that survey information or published new findings. And it was based on motorcycle ownership, I believe. And so there's a couple things that people have disputed about that, where there's a lot of different ways that women can be involved in riding and not show
Mhm.
up in that number. So, for example, a lot of women will ride their husband or boyfriend's bike, or their bike will just be registered, to a partner. And then with dirt bikes, especially since it's not like road licensed in most
Yeah.
cases, that also doesn't necessarily translate. And it seems to those of us in the industry working on the women's side, what we're seeing right now is a growth in popularity among younger women, and continued interest from we empty nesters or women who maybe got started and are coming back to it or just have always ridden. But it does seem like there's some growth, and we're all eager to see some new numbers come out.
Yeah, because I definitely have seen an explosion in exactly the sectors that you're talking about. And I guess maybe we should talk a little bit more about how you're involved in the industry because you really do have some insider insights on this. So I think it's great that you started off. It's interesting that you started off in this area where you were helping women at the beginning of your career because it seems like, you're now back at that, but there's a lot of years in between. So what were some of the companies that you worked for
um,
eventually?
Yeah, so I probably my big break was after I had a short stint at an electric motorcycle startup back in the 90s. I
Really?
went to work, yeah, yeah.
Wow,
Um,
okay.
I went to work for the American Motorcyclist Association on the
Mm.
magazine side doing advertising sales. So I really had my fingers in a lot of elements of the industry there. And at that time, I was also doing quite a lot of riding, but also I got into amateur enduro and motocross racing. And so
Oh, cool.
I was really fascinated early on, even before I started riding off road. I went to a women's motocross league race at the Washougal track in Washington, and I saw these pro women riders racing. And I didn't even think that women rode motorcycles or dirt bikes or anything like that. And so that always kind of stuck with me. And so then when I started riding off road, I always remembered that and I wanted to try it. So I did. And I've always kind of had this fascination of women who are doing off road as well as on road. So I was at the AMA for quite a long time, which was a lot of fun. I got to go to a lot of road races and motocross races and all of the industry events. And from there, I went to the parent company of Heingericke, which is now an obsolete brand, but at the time they were partnered with First Gear and
Mhm.
that company. And I was for part of that stint specifically working on a women's line. Many people will remember the G line or G by Heingerich. And
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so for part of that, it was also trying to help the European side tap into the women's market and kind of cross collaborate across the ocean. And so then after that, I've also kind of had this German language and culture in my history as well. So I've worked for Schubert, the helmet company, and Heingericke was also a German brand. And I went to BMW Motorrad in North America for several years. And then another German brand, I was involved with SW Motec for a while. And now I have stepped out of the corporate world and I'm trying to really dive deep into this women riders now thing because I think now is the perfect time.
That's awesome. I want to get to the women's rider now, but I want to touch a little bit because you're fluent in German and I believe in a couple other languages as well. And I do, in that stint, I think it's really important to say we're so focused on what the US market does, but you really have had a world market experience where one of the big things was that you were a charter member of the FIM. And maybe you can explain a little bit like what it is and, how significant that was.
Yeah. So the FIM, the English translation is the International Federation of Motorcycling. And so it's basically the world body of motorsports, similar to FIFA soccer world body or FIA, the auto world body. And back in the mid 2000s, they were also recognizing the growth of women ridership and created the CFM, the Commission for Women in Motorcycling. And this was a really interesting commission, and I was involved to be a charter member in that and help get it off the ground. And the focus was on growing and improving the women's experience in motorcycling overall. So not just as a rider, but also for women who are involved in the sport in any number of ways. There are female officials, there are female doctors on the pro circuits, women working behind the scenes in many ways. And they're trying to improve all of the experience for all of those people, including women racers on the international level.
Then one of the other things that you were elected to was in the Motorcycle Industry Council. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that because in getting back to this a little bit, we know that women are a small sector of this industry. So, in order to get some of these positions within these councils, it's actually a very big deal.
Mhm.
And I want to highlight that because you have been able to sit on a number of significant
Mhm.
councils and programs. So, maybe you could tell us a little bit about being, part of the board of directors.
Yeah, that was a really exciting experience, especially because I was the first woman to be elected to the Motorcycle Industry Council Board of Directors, which is the industry trade association for power sports. And that was really exciting. So I was elected and I served for 3 terms. And really, the board kind of guides the activities of the Motorcycle Industry Council, which focus quite a lot on government relations as well as just helping the industry as a whole, aftermarket companies, the major manufacturers, and also now they have a dealer side of it too. So they're really trying to work with dealers as well. And
Okay.
so, yeah, I sat in on the board meetings and was for most of the time the only woman at the table, and I've always had this hope that that would continue to grow and other women would be involved. There have been women on the board who have been appointed by companies they work for because the major manufacturers have a seat at the table. So occasionally there have been women on the board that way. And I'm really excited because right now there's a woman running for the board, and we should find out the election results any day. Ashmore Ellis is one of the founders of Babes Ride Out, and she's extremely influential in lifting up and growing the women's ridership, both on road and off road. And so I think she will be an amazing asset to the Motorcycle Industry Council, which just announced their new president, who is also a woman,
Oh, wow.
Christy LaCall, who came
Okay.
from a long career with KTM. And
Okay.
so, with all of these things going on, I think that we're going to see some really positive growth in the motorcycling world, and especially through the efforts of the Motorcycle Industry Council.
That's a very exciting time. I was going to ask you the question of why do you think that there aren't women in, top positions, but I'm not going to ask you this question. I'm going to say this publicly because one of the things that happens is that, most industries are male dominated except for basically nursing and fashion. So it's it's hard to have a conversation. I think we all know that the opportunity's just been there yet. That's my take on it. I guess I shouldn't speak for you, but that I'm bringing this up as a topic,
Yeah.
maybe more so than asking you as a question because you've been able to see it. And um, do you think that women want to get into these positions?
I think definitely yes, there's a lot of women who want to be involved in the industry, especially at higher levels. And I think that, I mean, you're correct. It's a male dominated industry, and hiring companies are known for, or hiring managers are commonly known to hire people who resemble themselves. So there's
Yeah.
certainly that
Yeah.
kind of a trait. I also think that if you think again about this number of women ridership, 19%.
Hmm.
If you think about that in relation to women who would be inspired to work in motorcycling for some reason, also it translates to there's a smaller pool of female candidates for open positions in the industry. But I would say that I feel like we're seeing a lot of growth. There are more women involved in industry companies. I've been noticing a lot more women in higher up positions, especially in marketing and design and even sales and management, which has been fantastic. And it's really exciting to see that because I feel like that's another indicator that this is just a big time of growth for the market and lots of potential.
That's fantastic. Is there a way that women can get, how would they go about getting more involved in the industry? Like what options do they have to seek information?
Mhm. Well, one piece of advice that I like to give about that is that having a passion for motorcycling isn't enough. Like you need to bring some professional background or professional business skills along with the motorcycling when you're applying for, jobs in the industry. And that said, I'd like to give a shout out to Jan Plessner. She's a recruiter in the power sports field. And we partnered with her on a series called Hot Jobs on womenridersnow.com, where she gives in addition to listings of open positions, she will do a article about, resume tips for the industry or interviewing tips for the industry or job searching tips for specifically the motorcycle industry. And so she and our hot jobs segment are some good places for women to look for jobs in the industry.
This kind of parlays into that you are now focusing fully on Women's Rider Now. And maybe you can talk about what is that and, why is this thing significant?
Sure. So Women Riders Now, it's an online motorcycling publication for women riders by women riders. So it's basically the number one resource for everything women in motorcycling geared towards riders and consumers. I believe it started as a Harley publication and then it morphed into Asphalt Angels decades and decades ago. And eventually Genevieve Schmidt, who's extremely well known in the women's riding circles. She created Woman Rider magazine, which was a print publication in 1999. And it was from those other publications she turned it into Woman Rider. And I was lucky enough to meet Genevieve right before she published her very first issue. And there's even a little picture of me in it, which was pretty exciting. And and so I became a huge fan of Genevieve and I saw her at events all the time. And she was also part of the movement where she would go to industry gatherings and do presentations on the women's market and how to reach the women's market and how to talk to the women's market and things like that. So that was really inspirational. And she kept the magazine going for a number of years. And then in 2006, she took it out of print and moved it completely digital and it became womenridersnow.com. And it's been great. I've kept up with her. I've been a contributor to that along with a number of other really great women in the industry. And in 2017, I partnered up with Erin Sills, the land speed record holder. And we went in and took it over from Genevieve. And we've been trying to, just keep the flame going. And we've expanded the segments a little bit. We transitioned the website to a fresh new look. And it's been really great. And it's been really fun. We've been watching our numbers grow. And then the really special part is that Genevieve continues to play a role. She'll always be the founder, but she also acts even to this day as an advisor and even a contributor. So it's a really great organization and the content that we put out there is specific for women and we cater it to what we hear women want to hear about. And especially we cover bike reviews from the women's perspective. We do reviews on women's gear and products or just any motorcycle related products of interest to women. It's also a great resource for people who want to get into riding or learn how to improve their riding. We have a really robust new rider segment with plenty of articles about what to wear, all of those kinds of things. And then we have a national calendar of women's events and a list of women's motorcycling organizations throughout the US. So we're trying to be really comprehensive to really help women find their way in motorcycling.
It's nice to have a central spot for all this because with social media, as we know, there's so many different segments and it's really hard sometimes to try to find information. So I like that you've got this one place. I mean, especially if you're listing all the women's events, that alone is a gold mine because it's so hard to figure out. Besides the really big names, I know that there's a lot of different smaller camp, a dirt day or something like that women are putting together. But like, how do you find out about that unless it shows up in your social media by accident?
Right. Yeah. And we rely on either events that we know about or that people send us. So, we try to be as comprehensive as we can, but, I'd encourage anyone who knows about a club or an event that we don't have, please tell us because we want to include it for sure.
That's cool. Is it mostly focused in the US or is it more international?
It's definitely primarily US focused. We do have a number of subscribers in Canada and overseas. And we work sort of closely with the Women's International Motorcycling Association, which is an international network of women riders, and they have rallies in different countries every year. So we do have some international readership through that partnership.
Now, you've also done personally a lot of traveling, motorcycle wise. So what are a couple of top trips you've taken or something that was really amazing?
Yeah. Well, I think since I was talking about the Women's International Motorcycling Association,
Yeah.
I fell into that when I was living overseas in Germany. And it's very closely tied with their Women on Wheels group in Germany. And so I went to a number of their rallies in different European countries, which is amazing because there'd be hundreds of women from all over the world. And
Wow.
everyone would, if they couldn't ride there, they'd rent bikes. And so, it was just really amazing to meet all these people from international backgrounds coming together. And one year, the international rally was in Japan. And so, yeah, it was
Oh,
amazing. So I went over with Alice Sexton, who at the time was the Women's International Motorcycling Association, or WEMA as we call it. She was the WEMA president of the US. And so we went over together, and we were able to get some media bikes through Women Riders Now. And we took a week in Tokyo where some of the WEMA members from Japan gave us this tour package and showed us around and took us to cultural events and things like that. It was really amazing. And then we took our bikes and we rode up to Mount Fuji and stayed at like a youth camp there with
oh,
everyone. I think there were 500 women there from all over. And we did some volunteer projects. We met a retired woman racer who's considered a national treasure in Japan. And we had music and culture performances every night. And it was just the most amazing taste of Japan I think you could ever have. I mean, better than just going there on a tour. We really got to meet people and talk with them one to one. And so I think that was one of the most amazing experiences. Another really cool ride that I had, and I know a lot of people ride across country, and I think if you haven't or it's not on your list, definitely do it. It gives you a different perspective of the US. Back when eBay was new, I bought a motorcycle on eBay on a whim. This thing. And it was in DC, and I bid on it, and I ended up winning it unintentionally. And the guy who was selling it picked me up at the airport, took me to the DMV to register it, and then I just picked people I knew across the country and picked my way across and rode back. And that was really fun. It gives you such a perspective of how different our country is culturally in different areas, and how different the terrain is in different areas. And then I picked up Route 66 in New Mexico, and I rode that back. And that was such a fascinating look at the history of our country and the things that you learn about the way, the freeway system changed, old Route 66, and the businesses that are still there and all the history. And I just think it's like a really interesting slice of America that a lot of people don't see when you just drive by on the freeways or, try to beeline somewhere. So I always recommend getting a taste of Route 66. I think it would be really fun to do it on a Harley just for that added Americana element.
I love it. I love it. Well, now I'm going to have to put it on my list of things to do because I have not yet done it. Um, this leads into one of my favorite questions to ask is how many motorcycles do you own?
Currently, I have 4 bikes in my garage, a sport bike, an adventure bike, and 2 dirt bikes. And that kind of ebbs and flows over the years.
Mhm. Now, with having your perspective in this industry and your experiences of traveling abroad, what are you seeing as some of the big changes for women, say over like the past 10 years?
I think one of the things that interests me quite a lot is when I started riding before the internet, this, decades ago, I had a hard time finding gear. And
Mm.
I joined a couple of like riding clubs and Women on Wheels, and everyone was constantly talking about, I can't find gear that fits. And the thing that I find interesting in the last 10 years, especially, is that gear manufacturers have really upped their game on making really good, really quality gear for women. And major companies, as well as we've seen a really big growth in small women-owned companies making gear for women too. And
Mhm.
I think the industry as a whole is still really struggling with that because in spite of all this, I keep hearing that complaint. There's no good gear for women out there. I can't find gear that
Yeah.
fits right. And this is where, there is kind of this catch-22 because dealers are reluctant to carry it because women are a smaller section of the industry.
Hmm.
But since they don't have it, women aren't going into the dealership to ask for it. And so it's just not as visible. It's available. And that's another one of the reasons that we try to be a resource to help women find this good gear and educate about what important safety features it has or what the fit is like. And everything from the major manufacturers down to those small women-owned companies. But the gear is definitely out there, and there's a wide array of somewhat protective but very fashionable, all the way
Hmm.
to the most technical utilitarian gear that you need for any specific type of riding. It's all there. It's just still a challenge to find it.
Yes, I would totally agree with you on that. I've done my fair share of doing gear testing, and it is each brand is very much all over the place with their sizing, which is not unlike clothing as well.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm glad that you guys have a good resource for it because it's hard to find in one spot.
Mhm.
If I try to go, with these indie people or up to say somebody like Alpine Star, it's really hard to get a gauge of what's available and how it fits
Exactly.
in our body. We're all over the place.
Yeah.
It always brings up also, whether to wear gear or not. And people are pretty much all over the board with that as well. With offering this as a resource, do you find that more women are pursuing gear or are they still trying to do hand me downs or just not wear anything?
I mean, I think it's a combination of both. If you're familiar with the Litos, it's an American-based but international network of women's clubs, and they really emphasize safety quite a lot, which I think is fantastic. And I think also there's a certain education that has to come into play about wearing gear. Like people, when they're new to motorcycling, don't know what they don't know, and
Yeah.
that's another thing that we try to educate on is why. And I do think that I have personally heard from women who move from a no helmet or a half helmet to a full face helmet when they meet other people who have crash landed right on their face.
Yeah.
And that's what the helmet is designed for. And if you have bad gear after the first time something happens or someone, I think women are sharing their stories about why. And so, yes, there's growing demand for better protection, and there still is growing demand for better protection that looks great.
Yeah. The other good thing is like for people to just keep in mind is that when your gear fits right, it's easy to wear, which
Yeah.
is like a
Purple.
little bit of a small thing that I like to emphasize because it makes a big difference in
Absolutely.
comfort in riding style.
Yeah.
Now, are you guys looking to do any, or do you already do any in-person events or are part of any rallies or anything like that?
We were pretty active with the international motorcycle shows, the IMS shows when those were around. And it's unfortunate that we don't have that resource anymore. We've kind of backed off of events other than we have had a few international tours that we put together. So, for example, we partnered with Blue Strada Tours and took a group of women riders and one husband and one father to Portugal back in
Ooh.
September. And we just had a fantastic time. And so we're kind of doing things like that. We're a very small team. So we will attend events as we're able to and as we want to. So I'm pretty active with my Leaders group here in Portland. So I go to some of their campouts and events and things like that. And we do go to industry shows as well.
Now, for these tours, are people able to sign up from them on your website?
For the last two that we did one in Italy a while back too. And we are basically a resource to let people know that the tour is going on.
Okay.
And then we work together with the tour agent basically who helps with the sign up and what you need and all of that. And then we'll go and participate. So we are kind of like there to welcome people and ride with them and all of that.
That's cool. Now, where do you see yourself in the industry at this point? As far as like, you're growing this business, but you have all this background. When I told a couple of people in the industry that you were going to come on here, and every single person spoke so highly of you and how not only well known are you within the industry, but also your contribution. And I want to make a point of saying that because it's a hard thing to come up if I ask you questions for you to be like, well, I did all these things, it doesn't, it's a harder thing to, but I just want to take a second and recognize that. So you do have a lot of pull. You're one of those people who silently has a lot of pull in the industry. And what is your vision for what's going to move forward, or like what you would like to do or see or accomplish? And it doesn't necessarily have to be within the women's,
Right.
segment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for recognizing that. I do appreciate that quite a lot. And I mean, right now I'm really focused, and Aaron Sills also, we're really focused on this women writers now. And our editor, Trisha Zaleski, she's also we've just started this really intense focus on women writers now. And so that's kind of where my head is right now. But I am definitely open to other projects in the industry. I do participate in the Motorcycle Industry Council meetings as much as I can. And I'm also a lifetime AMA member, so I participate in those things. And, I want to devote some time to women riders now and then see where things go from there.
That's fantastic. And I do think that we have so much potential. The women have so much potential right now.
Yeah.
It feels exciting, and it's great to hear that what you guys are doing, what you ladies are doing, and also about, when you bring up that for Ashmore to be,
Mhm.
directed, that there are opportunities to have all these different programs and visions and expansion for women.
Yeah.
And which will just mean more opportunities, and in the end, it also means more opportunities for men. It all grows together.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. As we wind up,
Mhm.
is there anything that you would like to add?
I guess that I would just like to say the womenwritersnow.com is an advertising supported organization. And so, for women who like us, please get the word out to your friends. We love seeing our numbers grow. We love seeing the women's market grow. And it helps us if women writers tell their contacts in the industry, or people who are doing events, things like that, because we need to hear from those people too. We do a monthly newsletter that highlights our recent features, and I would just recommend, please sign up for our newsletter. You can go to womenwritersnow.com. We also have links on our socials, but yeah, please join our mailing list and you'll be the first to know. We're about to send out a special holiday guide with deals just for our readers. So there's some perks to joining us too. And yeah, we'd love to hear from readers as well.
Oh, okay, that's great. I'll make sure to put in the show notes the link. So, Sarah, I just want to say, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me and to share what you're doing with Women Writers Now. It's very exciting, and it's a really great resource that I think will be wonderful for people to know, and any viewer to pass along to the woman in their life if they are not a woman watching this right now.
Well,
So,
thanks a lot. It was great talking with you. I just really appreciate you a lot. And thank you.
you're welcome. And to everyone else, as usual, ride smart. Ciao.